Hello students. In the last lecture we have seen what is the role of Economic and Social Council for the preservation of human rights and humanitarian law, and now in this lecture we will see what is the role of International Labour Organization for the preservation and protection of human rights and humanitarian law. Again I repeat that though our subject is international humanitarian law, but it relates to the human rights also, because though particularly we are looking for certain specific recommendations of the warfares and wounded prisoners and wounded soldiers and residential persons who are affected by the law, but at the same time this law is related to the human rights, and that is why the certain international instrumentalities which are working under the United Nations Charter, and those which are working and functioning in the area of human rights protection, preservation of human rights, taking action in the severe violation of the human rights. So all these are related with our subjects, and that's why in the last lecture we have seen what is the main role of Economic and Social Council for the area of human rights and humanitarian law. Now we will see what is the role of International Labour Organization in the preservation and protection of human rights, as well as what are the major functions that has done in the international humanitarian law. Now, what is this International Labour Organization? So, first of all, I will like to tell you that it is the international instrumentality that has been established for the betterment of labourers and to frame a concrete regulation for minimum wages and for the preservation of benefits of the labourers and interests of the labourers. So, there should be some uniformity for the preservation of any such incidents which are of severe nature in the violation of the human rights of labourers and injustice to the labour. So this is what the organization taking care about the labourers and their conditions at international level. So International Labour Organization that was established after First World War on April 19 of 1999, and it is an autonomous body which was an autonomous institution by the Treaty of Versailles and was associated with the League of Nations. So this was the initiation taken by the League of Nations for the betterment of international laborers. It is its original constitution format, part of the Treaty of Versailles, and on the October 9 of 1946, the amending instrument was signed in Montreal. First of all, it was established at Montreal. So, the origin constitution formed the part of Treaty of Versailles, and on October 9, 1946, the amending instrument was signed at Montreal, and which is cited as International Labour Organization Instrument of Amendment in 1946. So, the International Labour Organization became the first specialized agency associated with the United Nations when the agreement was approved by the General Assembly on December 14 of 1946. The International Labour Organization consists of International Labour Conference, known as General Conference. So the constitution or body of the International Labour Organization, it has Labour Conference known as General Conference, governing body, and International Labour Office, that is Secretariat. So the composition of International Labour Organization has three components. One is International Labour Conference, which is also known as General Conference. Second one is governing body, and third one is International Labour Office, that is Secretariat. So all the three organs, they are the part of International Labour Organization. The International Labour Conference is the supreme body which meets annually at International Labour Organization headquarters in Geneva. So the headquarter of International Labour Conference is at Geneva, and each national delegation is composed of two government delegates, one employers delegate, and one workers delegate. So all the three members, they are working for labor welfare. The governing body, that is Executive Council, that normally meets 3 or 4 times in a year at Geneva, and it elects the Director General of the International Labour Office Secretariat. In Geneva, it is composed of the permanent secretarial and professional staff. Then the conference, the governing body and office that make up at International Labour Organization. So the International Labour Organization has been working for the improvement of labour standards and conditions throughout the world since last 70 years. So it has drafted scores of conventions and recommendations, collectively designated as International Labour Office, a labour code covering a variety of subjects such as relating to employment, unemployment, conditions of employment, then employment of women and children, and vocational training, industrial health and safety, then social security, industrial relations, maritime labour, immigration, freedom of association, then trade union rights. So all these are the subjects which are covered by the International Labour Organization. Particularly General Conference will work on this. The International Labour Organization contraventions are juridical instruments similar to the treaties. So sometimes there are the contraventions by the International Labour Organization which will treat all the disputes at international level for the labor and employment related. The member states are required to submit them to the competent legislative authorities to decide whether or not the conventions should be put into the effect. Although the International Labour Organization cannot enforce states to accept its standards, it does keep watch over the way of the contravention or conventions they are applied in the countries which have ratified them. So it is like the surveillance, that vigilance that has kept under their own recommendations. And these are the member states are required to make regular reports to the International Labour Organizations regarding the adoption of the standards and the ways in which they have ratified the conventions are put into the effect. Then International Labour Organization was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace in 1969 for its functioning in recognition of its activities. So this is what the achievement, or you can see that the success of the role and responsibilities that has been put on the International Labour Organization for the preservation of human rights and humanitarian rights. Now, the role of International Labour Organization is not only limited to the labourers and employment only, but for international humanitarian law, it can also comprise certain recommendations based on the betterment and rehabilitation of those warfares and wounded and those retired soldiers from the naval forces because of such wounds and sickness and other effects of the warfare. So this is what the basic principle or fundamental principle of this organization is, to take care of the persons who are in need of such employment and who are in need of such regulation of the labor organization, and they should be rehabilitated, taking into consideration the services they have preserved for the country, for the nation, and for to protect their rights also. Now, let us see some Indian perspective related to the economic, social, and cultural rights and the Indian Constitution. So, if you see that, because we are also looking for the Economic and Social Council and its role in the preservation of the human rights, economic, social, and cultural rights of human beings, they are contained in the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The covenant has a significant feature in the different form of covenants on civil and political rights, while the Indian Constitution has covered most of these rights under the constitutional or fundamental rights. Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, we have incorporated most of the rights in fundamental rights, and Part 4 of the Constitution, which lays down the directive principles of the state policy, they are also for the preservation and protection of rights of the human beings under Indian territory. So they are for the protection of the fundamental rights of the Indian citizens. So the above parts contains a list of directives and instructions to be followed by the present and future governments, and in this way we have taken the best initiatives for preservation of the human rights in India also. We will see some of them which are related to this topic only. So, rights which are given under Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights under Article 7A, subclause I, equal pay for equal work. So, we have also incorporated this in our fundamental rights, Article 39D. Then, safe and human condition of the work, we have taken it into Article 42. Maternity relief, which is related for the women employees, that we have incorporated in Article 42. Right to work in Article 41. Opportunities to children, we have taken into Article 39 clause F. Compulsory education to the children, we have taken it into Article 45 of the Constitution. Living wages, that is Article 43. Conditions of work, that is Article 43. Adequate standard of living, Article 47, and right to child education, that is Article 21A. So these are the rights which are related to the welfare of the human being, and we have they have certain provisions under the International Covenant on Social and Economic Convention, but we have also incorporated them into our Indian Constitution, Part 3 fundamental rights, and somewhere where we cannot provide them as the fundamental right, we have taken them as the directive principles to the state policy to make the provision for the betterment of the human rights. So thus the rights to equal pay and equal work for both men and women, and the right to protect the childhood and the youth from exploitation, the right to secure the just and human condition of the work for maternity relief, right to work, right to a decent standard of life, then full enjoyment of leisure and social and cultural opportunities, and right to raise the level of standard of living, and right to free and compulsory education. All these have been recognized in Constitution as well as the Covenant under different articles. However, some of them they are not provided in the Constitution, but they are stipulated in Covenant. So we have covered them into the directive principles of the state policy, and where state will be the responsible person, state will be the responsible authority to take care of the human rights coming under the purview of such articles. Now, let us see some of them, that equal pay for equal work. Now, as it is related to the International Labour Organization, so what is the perspective of Indian Constitution over it? Let's see. The Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Right under Article 7A lays down that the remuneration, which provides all the workers as a minimum wage, fair wages and equal remuneration for work of equal value without distinction of any kind, in particular women being guaranteed conditions of the work not inferior to those employed by men with equal pay for equal work. So this is what the main basic principle, that for equal work there should be equal pay. But despite of this, if the employee is woman, some precautions, some facilities should be provided to such women employees, looking or taking into consideration the physical and other backgrounds for the position of the woman. Under the Indian Constitution, Clause D of Article 39, which is a part of Directive Principles of the State Policy, provides the principle equal pay for equal work for both men and women. The Supreme Court also, in the case the State of MP versus Pramod Bhartiya, stated that to say the rule having been stated as a directive principles of state policy, it is not enforceable in a court of law, is to indulge in sophistry. Part 4 and Part 3 of the Constitution are not supposed to be exclusively of each other or exclusionary of each other. They are complementary to each other, and the rule is as much as a part of Article 14 as of the Clause 1 of Article 16. That means equal pay and equal work is in a supporting position by the fundamental right as well as the directive principles of the state policy, and it will be the responsibility of the state to preserve such rights of the employee irrespective of the sex or gender. Another case, that is Ranveer Singh versus Union of India, and Supreme Court held in this case that the principle of equal pay for equal work, though not a fundamental right, is certainly a constitutional goal, and therefore not should be violated, and therefore the capable of enforcement through the constitutional remedies under Article 32 of the Constitution. So here again, if a dispute arises that Article 39, whether it is enforceable at the court of law, so definitely yes, because the Supreme Court has made this remark that though it is not a fundamental right, but certainly it is a constitutional goal. Unless you are not taking care of equal pay, equal work for the human beings, irrespective of their sex or gender, then you cannot give them right to dignity, you cannot give them the respect, and that is why it is enforceable under the constitutional remedies, Article 32 of the Constitution. So this is what the responsibility is on the state governments to take care of the human rights under various provisions, whether they are constitutional rights, fundamental rights, or they are the directive principles of the state policy. The another one we can say that right to livelihood. Again, though they are laborers and they are poor or they are having well-to-do condition, it is the responsibility of the state that to provide them right to livelihood. Otherwise, how they can survive? So this is what right to work, including the right of everyone to the opportunity to gain his livelihoods by work which he freely chooses or accepts. So unless they have the opportunities to work for their livelihood, how they can survive and how they can have the right to equal pay, equal work, or any other you can also say how they can have right to life. If they are not going to survive, if they don't have any means of the livelihood, then they have to beg for it. And then what is about their right to life with dignity, and what is about the right to life, how they can also get the right to food. So this is what the responsibility of the state, to provide such opportunities where they are in will of work. So, in Indian Constitution, the above right is not mentioned in the fundamental right as right to livelihood, but the right to livelihood has been incorporated under Article 39A and Article 41 of the Constitution, which are the part of directive principles of the state policy. However, the Supreme Court again, in another case, Olga Tellis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation, popularly known as the pavement dwellers case, held that the right to livelihood is an integral facet of the right to life guaranteed as a fundamental right under the Constitution. So Olga Tellez versus Bombay Municipal Corporation is the famous case, and it is popularly known as pavement dwellers case, where certain hawkers were doing their business at roadside, at the footpath side, and they were removed from their places by the municipal corporation, but they take action under the constitutional remedies, and the Supreme Court suggested that if they are not doing their business, how they will survive. So they should be provided the proper place for their businesses, and making the opportunities for earnings by the municipal corporation if they want to remove them from the roadside or footpaths. So this case was really interesting. Olga Tellez versus Bombay Municipal Corporation. So you study it by the brief facts and what was the judgment of the Supreme Court. Again, one thing can be said that if such rights they are not included in Part 3, but if they are the part of directive principles under Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, definitely they are enforceable by the way of constitutional remedy, and a petition under Article 32 can be put to enforce such rights against authorities. So dear students, we have seen what is the role of International Labour Organization in preservation of the human rights and in successful achievement of the humanitarian law. We also seen the role of Economic and Social Council. Again, I will repeat that international humanitarian law is a sub branch of the human rights law. So protection and preservation of the human rights are the basic principles again under these two subjects. So kindly go through the material on human rights, also different international instrumentalities on the human rights, protection of the human rights, certain covenants, certain treaties, agreements, and the other things, and the international humanitarian law. Okay.